Everything you've been taught about catching a liar is backwards, and that one mistake is the reason the best liars in your life have never been caught. You've heard the checklist. Watch the eyes, because liars supposedly look away. Watch the hands, because liars supposedly fidget. Watch the face for a nervous smile. Researchers who've spent decades cataloging lie detection studies have quietly taken that entire checklist apart, and the uncomfortable finding is this: almost none of those signs reliably separate a liar from someone who is simply nervous, tired, or being stared at too hard by someone who just read an article about body language. The body doesn't lie the way people assume it does, but it does leak something, something far harder to fake and far easier to miss if you're staring at the wrong spot. Get this wrong in a job interview, a negotiation, or a relationship, and you're not just missing a lie. You're actively rewarding the person telling it, because confidence is exactly what the checklist trained you to trust. And here's the stranger part. The reason the checklist survives anyway isn't stupidity. It's a documented default called the truth default state, a term from deception researcher Timothy Levine's work. Most people walk into most conversations already assuming the other person is being honest, because assuming honesty is what lets society function at all. That default is exactly what a comfortable liar is counting on, whether they've studied it or not, because a suspicious face is far more work to lie to than a trusting one. By the end of this, you'll know the one thing a person's body does the moment they lie that they cannot consciously switch off, and why the checklist you've been using your whole life has been training you to look directly past it. But here's where most people already go wrong before they even start watching. Lying is not an emotion, it's a workload. The moment someone decides to deceive you, their brain takes on a second job, holding the false version steady while also managing the true version underneath it so it doesn't slip out mid-sentence. That workload has a name in the research: cognitive load. And cognitive load has to borrow resources from somewhere. It borrows from whatever the body was using a second ago to move naturally, which brings us to the first place to actually look: the disappearance of illustrators. Illustrators are the small, unconscious hand movements that ride along with normal speech, the little chops, circles, and taps people make without ever noticing while they talk. Picture this: you're mid-conversation, asking your partner where they really were last night. A minute ago, their hands were loose, gesturing along with every sentence, the way hands always do in easy conversation. Now you ask the one question that actually matters, and their hands go quiet, resting flat on the table, almost deliberately still, as if the body has been told to stop moving so the mind has more room to concentrate on something harder. The same thing happens in job interviews. When a candidate's answer to an easy question is full of natural gesture, and their answer to the one question they were dreading suddenly comes out of two motionless hands folded in their lap. Stillness on its own could just be nerves, though. It's not until you notice what happens between someone's voice and their words that this starts to feel genuinely unsettling. And it gets less subtle from here. That's the second signal, and it's harder to fake than any facial expression: channel discrepancy. When someone is telling the truth, their tone, their timing, and their actual words move together as one signal, almost like they were recorded in the same take. When someone is constructing a lie in real time, those channels start to drift apart from each other, just slightly, like audio a fraction of a second out of sync with video. Picture this one too. You ask a coworker if they sent the email they promised. "Yeah, of course I did," they say, but the "yeah" lands half a beat too late, and it sits a note higher than the rest of the sentence, like it was assembled rather than spoken. The words say confidence. The rhythm says construction site. And even that isn't the part that should worry you most, because the real giveaway isn't something the body does on purpose. It's something the body cannot stop from happening for a 25th of a second. Here's the third, and it stops being subtle entirely. That 25th of a second has a name too: the micro-expression, first documented by psychologist Paul Ekman, a flash of genuine emotion that fires before a person can override it with the expression they intended to show the world. Picture yourself confronting someone calmly about a decision that hurt you, no accusation in your voice at all. For one instant before the practiced sympathy settles onto their face like a mask finally clicking into place, you catch it, the corner of the mouth lifting, not guilt, but something closer to satisfaction. Ekman called that flicker duping delight, the small thrill of getting away with something, and it shows up on faces that half a second later look nothing but sorry. It's also worth naming the darker exception here. This particular leak depends on the person actually feeling something about the lie in the first place. Someone who feels no guilt and no thrill because they've stopped viewing the lie as wrong at all may not leak this signal even for a 25th of a second, which means the calmest, coldest version of a liar is often the hardest one to catch this way and the most dangerous one to assume you'd immediately notice. Here's the part most people never notice consciously, even though everyone reads it on some level, which is exactly why a lie can feel wrong before you can explain why. None of these three signals work the way a polygraph is imagined to work, flashing red the instant someone deceives you. They aren't proof, and treating any single one as proof is how innocent, nervous people get wrongly accused. They're leaks, small, involuntary, and only meaningful when they show up somewhere your gut already expected calm. A person's body was never built with a switch labeled "hide the truth." It only has an effort system and an emotion system, and dishonesty happens to tax both of them at once, whether the person wants it to or not. That's the bigger, stranger truth sitting underneath all of this, and it's worth sitting with for a second. We assume the people closest to us would somehow look different while lying, the way a stranger might imagine danger announces itself on sight. But deception doesn't arrive wearing a costume. It shows up as friction, a half second of extra effort, a flicker of emotion nobody meant to show, hidden inside a face, doing its very best impression of normal. The body was never built to hide the truth. It was only ever built to manage effort, and lying is simply effort wearing a story, which is also, uncomfortably, why trust is so easy to exploit at scale. An entire relationship or an entire con can run for years on nothing more than a default assumption of honesty that neither person ever consciously examines. So here's what you can actually do with that. Next time an explanation feels slightly off, don't run a mental checklist of eye contact and fidgeting because that checklist was never reliable to begin with. Instead, ask one small follow-up question that forces the other person to add a new specific detail they haven't already rehearsed, rather than just repeating what they already said in a slightly different order. A rehearsed story stays smooth no matter how many times you replay it. A story being built on the spot has to work harder every single time, and that extra effort is exactly what leaks. Which brings this back to where it started. You were taught to watch the eyes, to watch the fidgeting, to run through a checklist built backwards from what actually gives someone away. And now you know the truth was never hiding in the eyes at all. It was hiding in the stillness, in the half-beat delay, in the flicker that disappeared before anyone in the room had time to name it. Have you ever caught that half-second flash on someone's face and then quietly talked yourself out of what you saw? If you have, don't scroll past that memory. Sit with it for a moment. That's usually exactly where the truth was waiting the entire time.